welcome all of you to Osgoode Hall Law School. I'm Lawrence Austin, the Dean, and especially I see familiar faces and I see a few who may be coming to Osgoode or York University for the first time. So we arranged winter to be gentle and look forward again to another in what's been a series of the APUTA lectures that's topical, compelling, and I think will generate a fair bit of questions and discussion afterwards. The APUTA lecture, which has been ongoing, absolutely, has been ongoing now for a number of years at Osgoode, particularly now in association with our Nathanson Center, is of course named after Justice Aputa of the Supreme Court of Nigeria, active with the Human Rights Commission, and particularly poignant this year as he's passed away. And so we now have a memorial aspect to this, and I hope it lives on as a tribute to his many contributions, both in Nigeria, in what I understand from Obi is still referred to as a golden age for the court, and of course is a model to many around the world of the role a court can play and the role the justice system can play in society. Now, the lecture series is a forum in which we engage with what's happening in Africa and in the global currents in which Africa plays such a central role. But also, it's a way to connect different aspects of what's happening in Canada at York University, certainly at Osgoode, and ways that we're both shaped by those same currents and can shape it as well. This particular lecture, we're also very honored to welcome the Acting High Commissioner of Nigeria in Canada. If I could ask you to let yourself be acknowledged. And I'm reflecting on a time when Obi made it possible for me to journey to Abuja and have a chance to see some of what makes the Nigerian legal community such a remarkable force. Let me welcome some more people in, and a chance again to see some of the trends that are shaping the legal system in Nigeria and elsewhere in Africa was a particular eye-opening experience, and I really value the opportunity to build on it through things like this lecture series. So with that, welcome, going just long enough to let some more people join the fray. It's a huge pleasure to welcome to the podium our own Professor Obi Okafor, who is, again, not just a force at the law school, but has become one of the thought leaders globally in the field of international human rights and in many ways helping to forge what transnational law can be and what roles Canada can play. So with that, let me, Obi, ask you to come up and do the honors of introducing our esteemed speaker.
Thank you so much. So before I go on, I would like to again recognize the presence in our midst of the Acting High Commissioner of Nigeria to Canada here, Ambassador Balarabe, who's here to honor the occasion. And of course, Minister Oluyide, a learned diplomat who I've had the chance to not only to know before he was posted to Canada. Please join me in welcoming him. Who's right here now doing good work. And of course, I want to say a few words about our guest speaker for today, my friend, Dr. Jumoke Oduwole, who is an academic like me, who I knew before she joined the current administration. Dr. Duole holds, is it SJD or JSD? I get confused. JSD, not SJD. Sometimes it's JSD, sometimes SJD. A JSD from Stanford Law School. You will agree with me, one of the top law schools in the world, in California. Another LLM from there, and also was at Cambridge as well. So has excellent preparation, and I'm sure it will show today. She's a well-published, notable scholar in many areas, including international economic law and our mutual area of interest on international law and development. She most recently was the Prince Claus Chair at the Institute of Social Studies in The Hague, in the Netherlands, which is where actually I met her while she was holding that, the first inaugural occupant of that chair in The Hague. So let me say, Dr. Duole, that we're very pleased to have you here, especially considering that this lecture had to be postponed the first time due to forces beyond our control, shall we say. So we're glad that you're here now, and I'm sure you all will join me once again in giving a thunderous round of applause and welcome to Dr. Duole. Thank you. Is it because of the sandwiches that you're not clapping harder? I know it's not fufu or anything, but
Thank you.
oh yeah.
For a few minutes. There's seats. Hi. Yeah. Okay. For a few minutes. The Dean of Osgoode Hall Law School, I think he stepped out, Professor Lawrence Sutton, the Nathan Center for Transnational Human Rights, Crime and Security of York University, the convener of the Oputa Lecture Series in Governance in Africa, my brother, Obi, the Acting High Commissioner, Mr. Jaffa Baralabi, and his colleague, Minister, Mr. Odi. The ever-vibrant African community at University of York, York University, deceptively quiet right now, till the questions start coming. I know you. And all our friends, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Let me start by commending Osgoode Hall Law School, in particular this center, for this lecture, for organizing this lecture, named for late Justice Oputa, one of the foremost judges in the history of Nigeria. Your commitment to using this series as a platform for actively engaging key stakeholders involved in governance in Africa is indeed a valuable contribution towards elevating dialogue on critical issues affecting the African continent. However, I must say I don't expect any less from this prestigious school. Your reputation precedes you. It's Canada's oldest and largest law school. Osgoode has remained top-ranking law school for quite a while now, and even in University of Lagos. My former head of department got his doctorate here. He's taught at University of Lagos for over 40 years. He was head of Department of Jurisprudence and International Law, Professor Akinweye Bode. And a more recent alumnus, Ige Bolode-Oku, was here about 10, 15 years ago for a doctorate. So we have presence of Osgoode, even at my faculty, University of Lagos. And I actually have been here. My brother used to rent a flat for about 3 years. So I've actually spent time on this campus about 15 years ago. So it's kind of a homecoming. Yeah. But to the topic of the day, governance in Africa remains an important issue worthy of continuous communication for the challenges and strides it has attained. And it is with great pleasure that I deliver this keynote lecture at this year's iteration of the series. It appears I'm the first female and very likely the youngest person to deliver the Oputa lecture. I saw the list of quite a few Nigerians, key public officials, and I feel privileged to share the podium that the past speakers have occupied. So, on governance in Africa, when I received the invitation to speak here, I was torn between many different aspects of governance in Africa that I would have liked to interrogate with you. But the man in whose honor this lecture is named, he was exceptional in his jurisprudence, he was well-versed in the classics, and elegant in his writing. He belonged to what many fondly call the golden era of Nigeria's judiciary, where he presided in our apex court in the 80s as a justice of the Supreme Court. To buttress this point, Oputa was nicknamed Cicero by one of his peers after the great Roman philosopher, lawyer, and thinker. Some of you will know by now that Justice Oputa occupies a special place in our nation's history for chairing the Human Rights Violation Investigations Commission, inaugurated by President Obasanjo in 1999, to look into the atrocities of the military era from 1966 to 1999. The panel heard over 10,000 petitions. However, the report was never released or implemented. And this fact in itself is a testimony to Oputa's integrity and candor, even in the face of the powerful. And he's reported as having once said to the media, and I quote, "The Human Rights Commission was like an exercise to bear ourselves out and see how deficient and unclad we are, to more or less appeal from the inside of our soul. It was set up to enable us to evaluate our ugly past and to create a purposeful future. I think it worked for us," end of quote. Indeed, it was the closest Nigeria has come to truth and reconciliation. And for this and more, Oputa's life remains a veritable source of inspiration to many generations yet unborn. This reminiscing on the Oputa panel led me to muse philosophically, I'm not a philosopher though, over the quagmire of leadership and followership on the African continent today. When we lament the plight of the African continent, as we often do, so many of us are quick to talk about the failures of our leaders, the dearth of good leaders in Africa, or Africa's leadership problem. Much of what has been said over the years is true. Apart from the likes of President Nelson Mandela, whom the entire world stood still when he died to honor him, our leaders have indeed failed us. But the question remains, who precisely is a leader, and what is the leader's role in society? Is there any element of good or bad leadership that is peculiar to Africa? I strongly believe good leadership values and principles are universal. They are inherent in human nature. Leadership in Africa is no exception. There's no special set of rules for us. On that premise, the African context and what is then the hallmark of great leadership, great governance. If good governance is a hallmark of development, how do we then develop? On development as a right. We consider the manifold problems in Africa as well as other regions of the world today. It appears that there is clearly an undisputable link between human rights, crime, insecurity on one hand, and poverty, economic underdevelopment, and exploitation on the other. The African continent is an experiment replete with well-entrenched inequalities and an ever-widening gulf between the haves and the have-nots that appears to have perpetuated a cycle of poverty in most of its societies. This situation leads to a question that has agitated the minds of legal scholars around the world for decades now, including many of us in this room today. Whether development is a human right, and if answered in the affirmative, what precisely such a right entails, particularly in an African context. As we know, the milestones of the evolution of the right to development are well demarcated in the literature. Generally, the International Bill of Rights, comprising the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, both of 1967, are presented as the precursors of the right to development. Although none of these international instruments expressly mention the right to development, it is upon this foundation that the building blocks of the United Nations Declaration on the Right to Development and the right that it proclaims are laid under international law. Originally perceived as a third generation or solidarity right, the right to development was explicitly established by Article 1. However, after celebrating its 30th anniversary last month on the 4th of December, the right to development still appears to mean many things to many people. George Keba Mbaye, a distinguished Senegalese jurist, is credited with initiating the discourse on the concept of development as a human right in 1972. He gave a lecture in Germany where he asserted that every man has a right to live and a right to live better. The developing countries that promoted a right to development at the time referred primarily to economic development and sovereignty over natural resources, in essence, seeking to reattempt the push on the new international economic order movement. More recently, Amartya Sen expressed development as a process of expanding the real freedoms that people enjoy. While over the years, the concept of development as a right has expanded significantly in scope, content, and implementation, it remains nebulous in terms of concrete entitlements and obligations, justiciability, and enforcement. However, leading scholars in this area, such as Okafor, have sought to bring some much-needed clarity to the conceptualization of the right to development, as well as the legal obligations that it carries. He argues as follows, and I quote, "The United Nations Development Program has correctively conceived of development in terms of human development. It has in turn viewed the concept of human development itself as denoting the creation of an environment in which people can develop to their full potential and lead productive, creative lives in accordance with their needs and interests. If this is what development means or ought to mean in our time, then the right to development should in turn mean the right to that kind of development, the right to the creation of the stated type of environment. This can be viewed as encompassing three main aspects: the right to the means of creating that environment, the right to the process of creating that environment, and the right to the benefits that flow from the creation of such an environment." End of quote. Interestingly, an element that has been less examined in the literature on the right to development is that prior to the United Nations Declaration on the Right to Development, the African Charter on Human and People's Rights of 1981 conferred a legally binding right to development on African people. An Igbo proverb says, "A man who does not know where the rain began to beat him cannot say where he dried his body." Differently put by His Royal Highness, Prince Claus, who a chair in whose honor I was privileged to hold, an awareness of one's own cultural identity and the past is a fundamental condition for sustainable autonomous development. Predicated on this sense of self-awareness, the African Charter was adopted by all African states to promote and protect the human rights and basic freedoms of Africans across the continent. The Charter was drafted with the intention of reflecting African traditions and values and a uniquely African conceptualization of human rights. Based on the wordings of the African Charter and the duties it imposed on states as well as individuals, at least on paper, the African system became an example of human rights regime that is more duty-oriented, particularly on individuals, than universal human rights system. Yet, almost 4 decades later, the development statistics regarding a large part of sub-Saharan Africa still contrast sharply with countries situated in OECD countries, such as Canada. Africa still accounts for less than 1% of global trade. Nevertheless, the continent has much to offer the world in terms of its people and resources. Paradoxically, as if full circle from the now nostalgic era of decolonization and independence, I will explain shortly why many countries in Africa again seem potentially on the cusp of a transformation, with the opportunity of leapfrogging over the past mistakes of other regions and learning from their successes in their quest for development. It is indeed an opportunity for Africans to define what development should be in a contemporary Africa and what matters most to the continent's people as we strive to break out of poverty and underdevelopment. However, the choices that Africans make today through our leaders will determine whether the continent will continue in a vicious cycle of underdevelopment or make the critical changes needed to enable it to progress. Just to show you that I didn't steal my degrees. but now I'm going to move on to, I wanted everybody to have something to take away, so whoever is interested more in the legal bits. But now I'm going to move on to really what's going on in the continent and more statistics and facts so we can have a robust discussion. So governance and economic development, the role of an enabling environment in Africa. One of the universally recognized limitations of economic growth and development is a hostile business climate. The phrase business environment, like many other terms, can be given a narrow or broad definition depending on the context in which it is being used. More narrowly defined, a business environment is the aggregation of policy, legal, institutional, and regulatory conditions that govern business activities, while more broadly speaking, the term could refer to all the factors external to businesses that can either inhibit or facilitate their development. Economic development refers to the sustained, concerted actions of communities and policymakers that improve the standard of living and economic health of a particular society. It involves sustainable increases in the productivity of individuals, businesses, and resources to increase the overall well-being of residents and maintain or enhance the quality of life. According to the World Bank, a good investment climate fosters productive private investment, the engine for growth and poverty reduction. It creates opportunities and jobs for people and incentives for firms to invest productively and expand. It is the key to sustainable progress. Undoubtedly, economies that both improve the efficiency, Undoubtedly, economies that both improve the efficiency of regulatory procedures and strengthen the legal institutions that support enterprise, trade, and exchange are better able to facilitate growth and development. Reduction of business costs, improvement of the quality and stability of growth, stability of government policies and regulations, as well as market entry, are some of the necessary business environment reforms recognized as being imperative for achieving and enabling a country's competitiveness. As African economies compete in the global economy, it is therefore the primary responsibility of African governments to ensure that we are targeting an enabling environment in which it is progressively easier to do business, where policies are predictable and consistent, and the macroeconomic stability, and where the government acts as a partner to business and investment, not as a competitor or adverse regulator. As an international economic lawyer, after years of challenging the asymmetry in the rules governing the multilateral trading system and its impact on African economies in a quest for sustainable development, it became apparent that even in a utopian international trade climate, unless African economies are prepared to participate competitively, nothing would change in terms of economic development. Therefore, as we look to external changes, it is even more critical that Africans are well-trained and prepared to actively and successfully participate in the global marketplace. Various reports and indicators for sub-Saharan Africa, such as the World Bank Doing Business Report, the World Economic Forum Global Competitiveness Report, and the new WEF Inclusive Growth and Development Report released last week, now show where our economies lie. Both government and the private sector need to collaborate to deliver economic prosperity to African people. The critical success factors of Africa's economic development are clear. For example, industrialization is key to making Africa a force to be reckoned with. But without power and infrastructure, this will remain a mere dream. Power is needed for everything, from mechanization to hospitals, to roads, to technology. I'm sure by now many of you have forgotten what a power outage is like, but a visit home would remind you. Importantly, Africa is a diverse region with economies at different stages of development. In the last few years, we have seen Africa's largest economies experience major economic challenges due to the crash in resource prices on the global market, particularly oil. So Nigeria, Angola, Algeria, Sudan, all in trouble because of their dependency on oil. And higher socio-political instability, particularly in Northern Africa, Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, since the Arab Spring. As a result, Africa's real GDP grew at an average of 3.3% a year between 2010 and 2015, considerably slower than the 5.4% from 2000 to 2010. Although percentage growth has slowed down for the region, and commentators have begun to view the Africa Rising rhetoric with cynicism, FDI and other capital flows to Africa have dried up, and accessing global debt markets is now tough. Yet this overall picture is misleading because the story is more nuanced than it initially appears. Many other African economies, such as Botswana, Cote d'Ivoire, Ethiopia, Kenya, Mauritius, Morocco, Rwanda, Senegal, Tanzania, Uganda, have continued to accelerate at a steady pace. The rest of Africa posted accelerating growth at an average annual rate of 4.4% from 2010 to 2015, compared with 4.1% from 2000 to 2010. Africa as a whole is projected by the IMF to be the world's second fastest growing economy to 2020. We must continue to leverage on our young, dynamic workforce, adequately train, and put our best people first to get optimal capacity. We are also leveraging on technology for development by fostering economic opportunities for innovative solutions to our problems. Africa is the world's fastest urbanizing region. Over the next decade, an additional 187 million Africans will live in cities, equivalent to 10 cities the size of Cairo. Urbanization has a strong correlation with the rate of real GDP growth because productivity in cities is more than double that in the countryside. Africa's urban GDP per person was 8,200 in 2015, compared with 3,300 in rural areas. However, African governments and companies will need to collaborate and work harder and faster to increase productivity and seize the opportunity to make the most of its clear potential. Africa's manufacturers must produce more to meet domestic demand for consumers and businesses. Therefore, governments must work with them to address factors hindering their ability to produce and export goods. By appreciating that we are all working towards a common goal of a developed region, African states, sub-regional blocs, and African Union itself have begun to collaborate more, and this is evidenced by the Continental Free Trade Agreement that's currently being negotiated. Africa's spending on infrastructure has doubled from an average of 36 billion from 2001 to 2006 to 80 billion in 2015 in nominal terms. As a share of GDP, however, infrastructure investment has remained at around 3.5%, less than the 4.5% that research has found is necessary each and every year until 2025. In absolute terms, therefore, this means doubling annual investment in Africa's infrastructure to 150 billion. Governments need to develop bankable projects, ensure adequate financing, put in place effective public-private partnerships, and optimize their spending. Between 2000 and 2015, Africa's manufacturing value added grew at 2.2% a year, which is at par with the world average and ahead of the pace in Latin America and Brazil in particular, but far behind the rate of growth observed in Asia, where manufacturing value added grew at 7.4% a year. Today, despite our current limitations, Africa manufactures 500 billion worth of product, USD, 80% of which is consumed within the country of production. So intra-Africa trade is still very low at 15%. We desperately need to create bigger markets that are really efficient. Reliable estimates from McKinsey's Global Institute report on Africa in 2016 tells us that the continent could double its manufacturing output to 930 billion in just 10 years. This would entail annual growth of 6.4%, triple the rate achieved since 2000, thereby boosting GDP and productivity growth, improving countries' balance of payments, and creating 6 million and 14 million stable jobs. If we hurry, just only if we hurry. Now, I'll just move to Nigeria in particular. I don't know how many Nigerians are in the room, but since I work for the federal government, I know the questions will come anyway. So let me tell you the answers first. Building an enabling business environment in Nigeria. The challenges currently affecting the Nigerian economy are numerous and may be known to some of us here. Nigeria is in its first recession in 20 years, with challenges with inflation, shortfall in government oil revenue, foreign exchange supply pressure, spates of insurgency and insecurity that have dominated the national headlines in recent months. With the current strong economic headwinds resulting from decades of overdependence on oil as a primary foreign exchange earner, the need to diversify and restructure the Nigerian economy has long been overdue. The forecast is that oil prices will stay lower for longer. And as we see this period as a tremendous opportunity that must not be wasted. Indeed, it is a tough but necessary period for Nigeria to achieve the desired structural changes and grow in sustainable, inclusive manner. In 2015, the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari started implementing aggressive diversification strategies to remove dependence on oil and focus on mining, agriculture, agribusiness, and value-added manufacturing, to mention a few, through the 2016 Strategic Implementation Plan. We've already begun to see some slow results. If you look at the GDP breakdown for 2015 and 2016 in particular, you'll see a creeping up in mining, solid minerals, and agribusiness. However, the government's priority remains bridging the infrastructure gap, both hard and soft, within the shortest possible time to create an environment in which the private sector can thrive. Prior to the coming of this administration, capital expenditure was at best about 20% of the annual national budget, which means 80% was recurrent. For the first time in 2016 and again in 2017, we set the minimum capital expenditure budget at over 30%. 7.2 billion in the proposed 2017 budget, all prices in US dollars. And we shall steadily increase this percentage of capital expenditure because this government is determined to accelerate the closure in the infrastructure deficits in the country in partnership with the private sector. Our strategy under the Nigerian Economic Recovery and Growth Plan is to finance a significant stimulus through the 2017 budget to energize and leverage private sector capital to reflate the economy. The NERGP is based on 3 strategic objectives supported by governance and a clear delivery plan. 1, to restore growth. 2, to invest in our people. And 3, to build a competitive economy, which is where I'll rest. Nigerians have never lacked good plans, but to achieve this, definitely we need strong governance, we need efficiency in implementation, and we need sufficient financing. In practical terms, to achieve competitiveness for Nigeria, we're working on a number of initiatives. The 2017 budget provision for the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment is to increase by 1,200% to 5.9 billion, from 5.9 billion in 2016 to 80 billion. This includes 50 billion for export promotions, processing zones, and 20 billion to fund export expansion grants, tax credits. 50 billion is to leverage additional private sector investment in creating world-class infrastructure in 6 EPZs located in each of the 6 geopolitical zones across the country. Nigeria must be well integrated into regional and global value chains beyond informal trade. Government is striving to ensure that trade facilitation and quality infrastructure are in place, operational, and effective. 1 week ago, on January 20th, Nigeria ratified the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement, and preparation for its implementation already commenced last year. The priority of the government is to increase local productivity to meet domestic demand. We as a continent, we need to produce more of what we consume. To achieve this goal, we are growing our labor-intensive manufacturing sector. Our Nigerian Industrial Revolution Plan is using special economic zones, like I mentioned, to accelerate growth by boosting manufacturing for domestic consumption and in niche exports, such as automotives, chemicals, and light manufacturing. We are collaborating with the private sector through PPPs to finance power, ports, roads, and rail projects to deliver accelerated infrastructure for Nigeria. We are increasing power generation by optimizing non-operational capacity, encouraging small-scale power projects, and pursuing long-term capacity. Many investors feel that Nigeria's inadequate infrastructure is one of the largest impediments to our economic growth, and this is a fair criticism, but it's as a result of decades of neglect and underfunding. However, our focus is to continue on the implementation of the Nigerian Integrated Infrastructure Master Plan within the context of the NERGP. Due to the well-documented links between stable and reliable electric power and economic growth, power is the #1 priority. As a government, we are working and implementing a number of on- and offline, off-grid power solutions to achieve incremental power. This ranges from solar home systems to large hydro projects, and multiplier effect of these solutions should be significant for economic growth. Our strategy in the short run is incremental power, which is all what we're doing now. In the medium term, our goal is stable power, and in the long term, uninterrupted power. In addition to hard infrastructure, we are not unaware of the challenges currently being faced by Nigerian businesses in the business climate. On our part, the government remains relentless in the goal of removing obstacles and roadblocks that have long afflicted commercial activity in Nigeria. Our vision is a dramatic improvement in Nigeria's business rankings over the next 3 years to a top 100 position where we were 10 years ago at 96. With increased cross-border trading, increased productivity across key economic sectors, and an improved business environment that is attractive to both domestic and foreign investors. It is in furtherance of this vision that President Muhammadu Buhari's initiative on improving Nigeria's business and investment climate came about last year. The Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council, the PEBEC, was inaugurated in July 2016. A private and public collaboration team started working immediately, and the Enabling Business Environment Secretariat became formally functional in October 2016. The PEBEC is chaired by His Excellency the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, who leads the reform project that will help Nigeria attain these aspirations. The Council's membership includes 10 honorable ministers, finance, power, foreign affairs, transport, the head of civil service, and the central bank governor. And they interface with all arms of the federal and state government, the private sector, and the international community. The EBIS, which I coordinate in my capacity as the Secretary to the Council, carries out the implementation of the Council's reform mandate. We have drawn from other countries' experiences in attaining impressive positive turnaround stories, including Georgia, Kenya, Rwanda, and Botswana. We started with implementing 4 priority areas, including the entry and exit experience of people, entry and exit of goods, the procurement process, some reforms in that area, especially for SMEs, and transparency using technology, with the aim of making Nigeria a progressively easier place to do business, particularly for SMEs, the engine of the economy. I'll give you a few examples. Our visa on arrival procedure is now operational, with all the requirements clearly listed on the immigration website. We're currently reviewing our visa policy to grant electronic visas and visas on arrival eligibility to many more countries in Africa and beyond, and this will be announced shortly. The airport experience is being worked on. Issues regarding processes, infrastructure, maintenance, and signage are being addressed. With the entry and exit of goods, the processes for exporting goods are being streamlined, and the single window will be implemented this year to reduce the number of agencies at the ports. In government transparency, ministries, departments, and agencies have been asked to update clear descriptions of their services, fees, processes, timelines on each of their websites. This January, we expanded our reforms to cover the 11 World Bank Doing Business indicators, starting with starting a business, paying taxes, access to credit, getting electricity, registration of property, and construction permits. However, this administration, our overarching goal is to implement improvements and reforms that will be visible not merely in numerical rankings, but in the stories and testimonials of business owners and entrepreneurs across the entire country. Beyond the specific indicators, we are aiming for visible, irrefutable, sustainable change across the widest possible spectrum of our business environment. In conclusion, as the largest economy on the continent, Nigeria's development is pretty much Africa's development. If Nigeria gets it right, then the rest of the country is in a much better stead. The rest of the continent is in a much better stead for development. Let me assure you that all that the Nigerian government is already doing and continuing to do will be to actualize our commitments and deliver on our promise. But we cannot do it alone. We need the partnership of the private sector, and we need foreign investors. We need Nigerians in the diaspora to play a key role in this regard. We've now come full circle to where we started. Is development the responsibility of the government, the governed, or both? I hope I have been able to convince you, particularly the Africans here, so many of you, that we're privileged, we the privileged, we can work together to strive to break the continent out of the cycle of poverty and underdevelopment. The choices that we make today will truly determine whether the continent as a whole will continue in a vicious cycle of underdevelopment or make the critical changes needed to progress. Once again, let me commend Osgoode Hall Law School for organizing this important Oputa lecture series on governance in Africa. I especially want to thank my host and convener of the lecture, Professor Obi Okafor. Yeah, he didn't let up. I was to come in October, he just wouldn't give up. For affording me this opportunity to share with you all some of the key priorities of the Nigerian government, particularly in building an enabling business environment for Nigerian businesses as well as international investors. So I thank you all for your attention, and I look forward to a vibrant discussion. Thank you very much. I hope I can sit. The first speaker, I didn't get your name. The complexity, ways to contribute to the environment or to the economy. I think basically just paying attention when opportunities come, if you have investment opportunities that come your way or that you notice in the Nigerian economy, please take them up. I mean, there's a lot of fear, and even treasury bills have great yield right now because the government is borrowing. They have like 18%. So do invest. I know that there's talk of having a diaspora bond. When it comes this way, please do participate because we need the funds. And without the funds, we can't do all the things we want to do. So I think those are some of the ways that you can support. 18, up to 18%.
What about factors like the uncertainty, the risk of investing in Nigeria? And what is potentially a treasury bill that can never be able to collect precisely?
A treasury bill is a sovereign bond. I don't know anyone that has said. That's why I said pay attention, ask questions, get a financial advisor, weigh the risk. There are a lot of entrepreneurs, you may think that's more risky. You can pull crowd funds, but
Let's say in the Americas, for example.
treasury bill is a sovereign bill. Name one person that is the Nigerian treasury bill has failed. It has not failed.
More the Nigerian.
Yeah. You said you're a Nigerian and how to participate more in the Nigerian economy. Yeah. So I think pay attention, get professional advice, and take the risk because knowledge is really power. Like if you're scared of a treasury bill, then definitely you have more homework to do to find out.
Treasury bills, no, I just want to clarify, there are different types of treasury bills. So for example, in the American market, there are treasury bills that are Canadian, the Canadian federal government. There are provincial treasury bills. So there are different types. So when you say invest in treasury bills in Nigeria, I wanted to clarify, what types of treasury bills are there in Nigeria to invest in?
In Nigeria, there's only one treasury bill. Any other state loan is a bond. Yeah, but a treasury bill comes from the sovereign, the federal government, and everybody knows bankable. Yeah. You're welcome. Olabode, the FX challenge, getting FDI, is it possible? So right now, I took the time to go through why the problems are there, the overdependence on oil for years. I think a lot of Nigerians forget that up until maybe 2011, just even 2013, we were in a $100 world, over $100 for at least a decade. But when we got into power, we had no foreign reserve. So the money is elsewhere, and we're trying to get it back, but it's a supply problem, and there's just no foreign exchange. Now, what we can do as Nigerians to support the economy is to consume less foreign exchange, be mindful of what we eat, what we wear, where we go, what we buy, what we consume as a nation. We're very import dependent, and unnecessarily so. We're the biggest importer of South African apples, but apples are grown in Jos. And by the way, we have some of the most delicious mangoes and pineapples in the world. So we have to structurally adjust ourselves, self-moderate, to make sure that we don't put additional pressure on the dollar, because there's been a lot of speculative, where the real value is definitely there's like inflation of at least 60% on the dollar. And more importantly, the only way to fix a supply side problem is to increase supply. So that means encouraging businesses that are exporting or encouraging more businesses to export to earn foreign exchange. Because there's really just no magic that's going to happen. Oil prices are going to be lower for longer. And even if oil prices increase, we have the Niger Delta Avengers trying to make sure that our production remains at zero. So we have to think outside the box. We have to take our eyes off oil as a source of foreign exchange. And we really have to work. I talked about working harder, working together, because it's really, that is what it's going to take to fix this problem. There's not going to be, there's really no amount of complaining that would solve the problem. It's known what people need to do for the economy, and we all just have to strap up our boots and do it. That's the blatant truth. Yemi, the entrepreneur. I think government impact on SMEs, I think a lot of attention is being paid to SMEs. There are quite a number of funds, Bank of Industry, because SMEs, one of the main problems is access to credit. So they have SME funds from Bank of Industry, Bank of Agriculture is being recapitalized, Bank of Development is coming on stream, the central bank has some funds as well. But SMEs also need a lot of capacity building, having all the requirements to be able to access those funds, because sometimes you have all the funds there and not enough people drawing down. On government's part, making these policies more available, making it known across a broader spectrum that these loans are available, and then simplifying the procedures for things like access to credit, paying taxes, getting on the procurement database for government. There are a number of things, because government is like the biggest spender. So if more SMEs can get on the government's procurement database, that's one of the things we're actually working on. Then you have more of the money seeping down across the economy. So there are a number of things happening, but I think the reality is that it's just going to take a bit of time. That's the reality. Steve, you're in real estate. Power. I said power is our number one priority. We've been working on it. Right now, we're even doing an audit to find out, because you have a lot of people not properly connected, tapping off power that's supposed to be dedicated for an airport. There are a lot of misalignment in the power sector. So even getting a proper audit of what each area needs capacity-wise, and then able to channel power to industrial areas so that businesses have a steady source. We're working on that very actively. A lot has happened on power. If you just Google maybe the website of Ministry of Power, a lot has happened in that space. I've listened to the minister speak several times, and I know that a lot is happening there. I don't know about the Enugu mine. I don't know anything about it, but I can find out for you if you really want to know. Power in general is something that without it, we're not going to be able to get industrialized. And it's actually something that we have a power master plan, and we've been working on the critical steps, because the industry has a lot of some complications. You know, there was a privatization about 3 years ago, and you have the generators, the transmission, and the distributors. Now, they went into dollar contracts, but they have receivables in Naira. So there's a misalignment. I don't want to go too much into the depth of the power sector, but the power sector needs a rearrangement. And we actually just in December finished discussions with the World Bank to actually map out a new power strategy to help bring in some financing to restructure the power sector, particularly the distributors, so that the cycle can be well funded, because there's a problem with the way the money was going around. And of course, there's a problem of gas, which goes back to the Niger Delta. The supply of gas is also harming power generation. So the issues, the comfort I can give you is that the issues are well known, the solutions are known, and the implementation is ongoing. Justice, the impact of government on the common man. Someone talked about complexity in Nigeria. It is a complex country, but I think the common man there's need for power, there's need for food, there's need for health, there's need for education, and there are different people handling those areas, and work is ongoing. I think for the PEBEC, there is private sector participation. The team that I head is a public-private sector team, and then we relate with, in fact, one of the reform leaders used to work at the Nigerian Competitiveness Council, which was under Tony Elumelu. In the last administration, they had a private sector council. So we are definitely relating to them. On the cost of governance, I can only speak for my office, the Office of the Vice President. If any of you know him or have seen him, he does not have those kind of excesses. And I think when the leadership, I can say the same for Mr. President, and I work in the presidency and I don't see 50-man motorcades coming or going. I don't think any governor or anybody coming to the villa comes with that kind of, the body language is just not that. And I think, I think if you pay attention, people actually crack jokes about the body language. Nobody wants to be seen to be having such excesses in this particular administration. It actually puts the spotlight on you. So I think there's a lot more discipline if you maybe update the common practice, because we have preconceived notions and it's difficult to let them go. But I think really keep engaged and keep asking questions. You said you were home in December, I think? Okay, you were home. Okay, so tell Justice. Yeah, so Yemi was home in December. So let Yemi tell you what he saw in December. I think I'm done with these questions. Yeah.
So
I have to read them to remember. Okay, Akure. Yeah, Akure. The question on bigger markets in Africa, ease of doing business, ease of traveling in Africa. One of the things I talked about was a new visa policy that we're working on to have visa on arrival to more African countries. It's work that's ongoing. Actually, the policy is ready, but it hasn't been approved by the Federal Executive Council. So that's really, if you try the visa on arrival now, it works. And we're trying to improve access. The African passport is on. At least African Development Bank, they now have the passport. So that also was done, I think, last year. I mentioned that we ratified the Trade Facilitation Agreement, and you know what that means for import and export of goods, so that's also done. I think we should actually recognize when things are done, because I don't hear that much. I don't hear the current, if we're so bothered about what's going on in Nigeria, there are newspapers. If something happened last week and then if it's a burning issue, then we should just know what's happening so that we speak authoritatively with facts. I'm here to engage, so I'm happy to share. But I think that also, as citizens, we have a responsibility to be informed citizens and to really engage in what's going on. So where there has been progress, where you left it is not where it still is. No. It's moved. Yes.
Was small.
Yes, and I said it. I said a little bit. The things we started in 2015, 2016, if you look at the GDP of last year, even in the recession, quarter 3, quarter 4, you will see that agribusiness is up. You will see that mining is up. See, our farmers are better off now that people have to actually eat what they grow.
Everybody's farming now.
Exactly. Everyone wants the farm. And I talked about painful structural change. It's painful and it's tough, but we just need to restructure that economy at all costs. I think it's really, for me, it's a make or make year. With mining, we have a new mining plan. There's been a lot of mining activity. I still was with the permanent secretary from that ministry because they have guests coming in. I don't know whether specifically they're coming to Toronto, and I don't think it's about whether they come to Toronto. I think it's more about, do they know the leading mining companies globally? Are they engaging? Fayemi is the minister, and he's on top of it. That I know. So have they mapped out all the big players? Have all the big players come to scope Nigeria? Yes. Have they said what they need as an enabling environment? Has he brought it back to government that XYZ is what we need? We need security when we're trying to go into, because mining is not done in the city. So that's the level of the conversation now. They've come, they've seen, they're interested because the solid minerals are there all across the country. It's not limited to any part of the country, Emeka, all across the country. The solid minerals are there, and so people that want them will go wherever to get them. So you skip power. You didn't like the quote about if Nigeria gets it right, others will get it right because others are already ahead. So the truth of the matter is that Nigeria is by far the biggest economy on the continent. And even leave GDP, the market size, everybody that wants to come into ECOWAS, we have such a huge problem blocking the EU, ECOWAS, the free trade agreement, because everybody is targeting Nigeria's market. If we are able to get all these things right, already Nigeria is about 70% of ECOWAS, both in market and in contributions, anyhow you want to look at it. And ECOWAS is 15 countries. So it's not a matter of arrogance. A lot of Africans that I meet across, because I travel quite a bit across the continent, and their first thing is like, what is Nigeria doing? What is Nigeria waiting for? If Nigeria gets it right, even just in intra-African trade, if Nigeria is a huge exporter, and already informally, Nigeria is the producer for Central Africa, West Africa, definitely. They're trading informally though, under the radar. So if we get it right formally, and we get our processes right, and we're an engine of the continent, it pulls up all the countries. And that's just the...
Can I support you on that?
Please do.
KFC did not want to go to Nigeria. They chased them, come, they didn't want to go. The person that brokered that deal said, you know what, I'm not telling you to come, just visit. They landed at Muritala and put them in a private helicopter. They flew over Lagos and they told them,
Hungry people.
this is Lagos.
Yeah.
They came immediately.
Immediately.
And look at KFC right now. So yes, but I think what he's talking about is in terms of development, light, security, good roads. We are way behind.
Yeah.
And really, I think it's more of if we come together
Yeah.
as a nation,
Yeah.
we can get there even a lot faster. But government is moving slow.
Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. Because government, you see, government... See, government, you know what?
Let's let the erudite professor. Let's let her go through. Let's let her go through.
So, what he's talking about is actually what I'm talking about. If Nigeria has an enabling environment and the GDP quadruples, it has a multiplier effect across the continent. So it's the same thing we're talking about. The fact that we have the market, once we get it right, everybody else automatically. Now, when it comes to, what was this? Yeah, land reforms. No, even before that, you said government is moving, but very slowly. I mean, it's complicated, and even meandering through, coming out of the hole that was difficult. I would not lie to you, for a good number of months, just trying to figure out what was going on or not going on. It took a good number of months before you start building processes, checkmating, auditing, so many ghost workers. I mean, I lived in Lagos, but moving to Abuja has opened my eyes to just the sheer complexity of Nigeria. It's a very big country. It's a very complicated place. A lot of interests. Where politics meets policy is a whole different ballgame, but that's just an aside. Land reform, you're a lawyer, I'm a lawyer. You know that the land is vested in states, but you're directing your question to the federal government. We do collaborate with them. I mentioned it. It's one of the indicators for the World Bank. So I, for one, for over a year, I've been working with Lagos State and Kano State because the World Bank measures them. But from Next year, we're working with all the states from like Q3 this year on subnational indicators. But you know that we're a federation, and land is definitely in the hands of states. Somebody else talked about the federal government. What's the federal government going to do about Rochester? If you are from his state, write to him. Use your voice, use your vote. I work for the federal government. He's a governor. He's a subnational sovereign. He's a subnational. So we,
That is part of the problem we have in Nigeria. We want to know when we call it a federation and when it becomes a unitary state.
no. I'll come back. I'll come back.
The governor comes to Abuja to draw funds.
Not just draw fund, it's paid to his account.
However they
Yeah.
do it, who pays it?
It's his share around the whole country, but I'll come to that anyway.
Federation begins.
I'll come to that. So registration of property, construction permits, access to lands, these are a lot of issues that have to do with state governments, but we're working with them on these issues, and they're cooperative. Open governance, I think the federal government, again, just on the 23rd, just Monday, had a quarterly business forum with like a cross-section of private sector. That's a presidential quarterly business forum. Organized private sector, individual companies, service providers, they brought a whole list they presented. They had an engagement. Sometimes there are town hall meetings where ministers go. The ministers are out speaking a lot of the time. So I think when people say open governance, ministers to come out and present, they are. I mean, if you just Google the reporting of the federal, of the presidential quarterly business forum that happened on Monday, it'll still be online. You'll see the issues that are discussed, and I can even share them with you. But to say categorically that is not happening is wrong. Yeah.
Can we get that ongoing?
Yeah, but it's on. That's the thing. It's on. Exactly that. It's on. That's the thing. Exactly that. It's on. So that's what I'm saying, that also we assume a lot that the ideas we have are not being done. But a lot of them, because you know, the problems are not new. They're not new. And almost any solution you can think of, somebody else is thinking it too and then trying to make it happen. So it's now a matter of meeting the conversation where it's at and moving. But I think a lot of people already have a closed mind. Nothing is happening. I heard government isn't doing anything, this, that. I can chronicle for you even just what I am doing, and I'm not a minister. So, and facts, I'm not talking about, facts of what I'm doing, and I'm government. So to make blanket statements is a bit, I don't know. The FX, we talked about it before, Okoye. I talked about the special economic zones and the reform. They were there, they were built, but they were white elephant projects. Nothing was done with them. So now they've been inherited, they're dilapidated, we have to renovate them. We actually have Justin Lin coming around. They came, scoped the country. That's the former chief economist of the World Bank. And he has like a consultancy thing. And they're working on it and looking at competitive advantage. So all that work is definitely being done. Emeka, political will, yes, without a doubt. Don't even doubt it. There's political will. What's the federal government doing to make Nigerians belong? My boss, the vice president, he was in the Niger Delta last week. He was in Niger Delta last week. He was there last year again. He went to launch the cleanup. Mr. President has been there.
Minister for Environment.
He's there all the time. I mean, there's a lot.
Again, please, I don't need to dominate this conversation.
Okay.
I'm not, we want to address an issue.
Okay. Let me just, so that other people can talk. Yeah. So I think even when we talk about the ports, Calabar ports, Port Harcourt ports, we've said it so many times. We want to concession all of them. It's not the job of government. Government wants to create an enabling environment for businesses to thrive. Get a consortium together. Land home. Yeah, pitch for it. I'm telling you, foreigners are taking over. Because people say investors aren't coming. You need to know the number of foreign investors that are quietly coming in different sectors, fast-moving consumer goods, ShopRite, I mean, agriculture, agribusiness, Israeli companies that make juice, all sorts of people are coming to clean up while Nigerians are still just lamenting. I don't know, sometimes it's a bit like how to shake people, like while we're lamenting, people that are taking a long-term view of our economy are coming in now that our currency is weak. They're buying things up for the cheap, and they're settling down happily knowing that if I factor in 10, 15 years, the Nigerian market alone, I'll make my money back. If I'm not in a hurry to take out my dollars, I'm fine. You said it yourself. So we have to sort of tweak how we look at our country, because we don't have an ownership feel for our country. And I'm sorry for the non-Nigerians to dominate it, but I guess it's because I'm from Nigeria and a lot of people here are Nigerian. We need to step back and look at it objectively without the emoting. I hear a lot of the emoting, but those emotings, they're one layer of the complexity of Nigeria, but the fundamentals, there's so many businesses that would not miss it.
Just 1 second. I will be fast. Literally 1 second.
Okay.
Social engagement
Yeah.
is not because we are criticizing government. Even in America, in Canada, we hold government accountable by raising our concern. Nigerians are not complaining. I don't like when I hear that voice, that word from our leaders. We are not complaining. We are engaging our government in a different dimension. In America, to Trump, that.
No, let me tell you. You know, let me tell you, let's be frank. Nigerians emote without facts. There's so many facts that I can give you to counter a lot of the questions you asked. I've told you they're happening, there's engagement, whether it's social media, whether it's public forums, whether it's in the newspapers. It may not come to us, maybe it doesn't come the way, because I always wonder, is it that it doesn't come the way the listener wants? Is it that there needs to be some sort of communication strategy? I actually have a meeting next week, communication strategy, just to address this. But the truth of the matter, and I think you will bear me witness, where 2 or 3 Nigerians are gathered, it's a Nigeria bashing session. You don't hear that balance. You don't hear, maybe you hear one lone voice that is screaming in the wilderness that, look, there's change, there's opportunity, but a lot of Nigerians have a preconceived government is doing nothing. Nothing is happening. You know, and just stay there and are convinced in themselves that nothing's happening. And I see non-Nigerians coming with a different mindset to the same Nigeria and making millions, the Indians, the Lebanese, the Israelis, not to talk of the Chinese, not to talk of... It is.
Okay, guys. There's too many comments. I'm enjoying myself. I'm a teacher, so I like classes like this. And she's a teacher too.
Yeah.
So next time, don't think I'm trying to shut down. Just, I'm the person who has to keep the clock, right? So I'm trying to get as many people in as possible. Please, can I please read the people?
You can talk after.
Just a question. If it's a comment, a question, 1 minute, a comment, 2 minutes, please, so that I can get everybody. I want everybody here to speak. Please.
I flew all the way, so I'll stay after.
I have a list. You can add some time. So, Mr. Mandi, please.
Dr. Oduwole, I have one comment and a couple of questions. It's not going to be long. My only comment is that I think we agree that you did not thief your degree. You've definitely acquitted yourself very well. So thank you for your presentation. Now, I have 2 questions, and they arise directly from your presentation. One of them is that we are here at the York University Osgoode Hall Law School. Now, during your presentation, you said something about business ranking of Nigerians. My question to you is, where would our university rankings be? Because at the end of the day, when you look around here, you're going to see that most of the people who are here, went to Nigerian universities when it ranked somewhere, which is different from where it is now. So I'm not going to waste time on that. The second question is, you also talked about more than 1,000% increase in the Ministry of Industry in terms of going from like 5 billion, and I believe that's naira, or is that dollars?
Naira.
Okay, 5 billion naira to about 80 billion naira. So I heard you say that. So my question, what I've thought in my mind is, as Nigerians, we hear the word billions all the time. I remember the billions in dollars that was spent on power by the Obasanjo government. We are still in the dark. We are aware of the billions of dollars that was spent on the Nigerian army, and they have no arms. And the Boko Haram is still there. So my question is, what has changed? Why are these billions not going to end up in the places the ones before ended up? Thanks.
All right.
Thank you.
Mr. Abokwa?
Good afternoon. Let me share that about a practicing lawyer here. Thank you. I am in the business of solutions. There are some of those things that the government could do without necessarily spending money. For instance, to improve the power sector. Nigeria is one place that we actually don't need much prodding to know that maybe if we have good policy with respect to renewable energy, for instance, solar energy, government can actually do something to crash the prices of solar energy so that individuals who can actually equip their houses with solar power can actually do that and get off the grid or stop buying diesel or stop buying generators. So instead of, for instance, making policies such that it is easier to bring in import generators into Nigeria and do all those things, what is the government doing to actually make it easier to reduce the prices of even solar panels so that individuals, and Nigeria has many thousands and millions of individuals who can, the blink of an eye, probably install solar panels on their homes and get off the grid and have the power available for others who can't even afford that. My next question is, we all know that one of the major problems affecting investments in Nigeria is rent seeking. We have too many policies and regulations that basically encourage people to seek rent from other people. All you need to do is when you land at Murtala Mohammed International Airport, from the time you get to the entrance, how many people that will greet you even when you go into the washroom. Just to be able to do your business in the washroom, people are greeting you inside the washroom. Yeah. Curbing rent seeking, reducing those things that actually make it difficult for people to do anything. My last question, if I may, will be in terms of the Forex. I mean, people talked about Forex in terms of what can be done about Forex and all that. Even without spending money, isn't it something government can do to actually encourage the repatriation of Forex into Nigeria by Nigerians in diaspora? Believe it or not, we pump in, by we I mean Nigerians in diaspora, probably bring in much more money into Nigeria than Nigeria ever gets in selling oil. But I recall some years ago, I think it was during Obasanjo, when you can go to Western Union and send US dollars into Nigeria, your people can go to the bank, collect US dollars and change it wherever they want. That is one way I think that foreign exchange can get into Nigeria and even crash the dollar prices in the black market and probably make an impact in the disparity that currently exists now between the official foreign exchange and the black market. These are things that government can do without spending money, but it doesn't seem that it's being done.
Okay, Mr. Demola.
It's okay.
When it comes to small scale businesses and the exposure of those businesses to the young adults in Nigeria, why isn't there so much focus in that? All I hear is foreign influences, foreign
Sorry,
investment.
Sorry, you need to slow down.
Oh, all right, when it comes to small scale businesses and their exposure to young adults in Nigeria, there's not a lot of attention being paid into that. And I hear a lot about foreign exchange, foreign investment, and I feel like we should invest more in our young adults because a few decades from now, you guys are going to start thinking of retiring, and it's left to us. Yeah, and my second question is the interaction of natural resources and politics. Like, how do we alleviate the negative aspects of political influences on natural resources and management? That's it.
All right.
Thank you.
Mr. Boma.
Before I answer my question, I wanted to respond to him. I'm from Bielsa. So when you talk about the Niger Delta, I want to be specific on militancy. 80% of them don't want jobs. So like you said, let's get facts straight. I also worked on the government level in Bielsa. I'll give you a very simple illustration. A guy walks into the Commissioner of Agriculture's office. He's asking for money. The commissioner says, I'll give you a job. He says no. He doesn't want a job because he believes that if he begs 4 commissioners in a day for money, he will get much more than what he will get in a month from working a job. I have been approached by the militants to get myself enlisted to just collect funds from the federal government. 80% of them don't want jobs. So let's not talk about Niger Delta as if they are suffering. They are suffering, but their leaders are also part of the problem, not even federal government. That's one.
Thank you for
Secondly,
that. Yeah.
my question, the other gentleman has asked it, but I just wanted to be a bit more specific. We have abundance of sun. In fact, it's a big problem. So what is the federal government doing specifically in terms of solar? You mentioned home solar energy. What is the policy? I want us to be very specific. Then if we are looking at solar on a regional or national level, as it were, on a broader level, aside from the individuals having them in their homes, do we have the distribution network for that? All of this that we're discussing will always boil down to 2 things: corruption and security. We don't have security. At times, to be very honest with you, it's not as if Toronto is any better. There's not parts of Toronto that is bad. I feel safer in Lagos, to be very honest. So it's not so much of a jurisdictional issue, but we must deal with it as it comes. So specifically, and this goes back to federal government and on the subnational level, governors, most governors, again, I worked on the state level, so I know what I'm saying. Most governors are not out there for the people, they're out there for their pocket. What's federal government doing? Thank you.
Hi. How are you?
My name is Lillian, and I'm from Rwanda. And so we've been discussing about. So we've been talking about Rwanda, and one thing comes to mind. There was a time in Rwanda when doing business was so difficult because you had to give what we call chai, which is tea, which is bribe. You had to give chai to the person opening your gate to get your goods in, you had to the secretary, to everybody. And one of the things that has really helped Rwanda, and we still have a long way to go, is the fact that we have taken a very strong stance on corruption. And so I'm just wondering, is this something the Nigerian government is equally working on? And what are the measures legally and in terms of policy that are being implemented to make sure that that issue is taken care of? Thank you.
Go ahead. Yes.
Hi,
Sorry, I forgot your name.
no, it's Jennifer. And the question, for part of the question I have, some people have already asked it, so I didn't really go back. And the major question I had was regarding sustainable energy production. And we talked about mining and extractive industries, basically. And my question is, what is the government doing in terms of to ensure that there's corporate social responsibility? Because we see this as a big problem with the extractive industry in Nigeria. And regarding to coal and oil, and oil in the Niger Delta as well. So that was my question. What's the government doing in terms of sustainable energy production and, maximizing the resources that we have, renewable energy resources like solar? And what are they doing?
Okay, thank you. To laud your government because in respect of the efforts they are putting in order to address the issue of corruption. But I will be quick to say that it appears that the government's fight against corruption is all about arresting corrupt officials, prosecuting them, and recovering the money. So I look at it as a kind of misconception because we are talking about power generation, we are talking about investment. All this should be handled by human beings. So I think the government should be doing a lot to change our perception, our worldview. Because if it ends up in just arresting the person, prosecuting him, and punishing him, it cannot. The system will remain the same because the next person who goes in will be prone to getting involved in stashing away our cash overseas and stuff like that. So I just want to find out what the government is doing, whether the government is what the government is doing to introduce programs that can change our perception of the world. Because if you see Rochas Okorocha going with 300 cars, my humble self, if I am introduced into the political scene, I might be tempted to look up to him as a role model. So something must be done in order to at least change our perception of leadership. And I also want to ask one question because I am aware that your government has recovered about 9-point-something billion. And the government has insisted that they were not going to mention the names of those who they recovered the money from. So it is going to be, because I think it is important to tell the world who the monies were recovered from. Because at least let them go with the reputational damage. Because if no reputational damage is attached to the person, there is no deterrence. Others may steal as well. You will recover it from me, but nobody knows I was the one. So please, this is what I want to say. Thank you so much.
We're going to take a pause just to hear from social media.
Well, there are quite so many
From
comments.
Nigeria. People are asking questions from Nigeria.
So many comments. But I'll just
around the world.
okay, I'll just restrict it to probably 2 or 3. This first one from George Ikoli, SAN, I think, responding to the implementation of the online and offline power solutions, saying that power has been deplorable within the last week, so much so that we are now reputed to have a ministry of darkness. But the question is, since we pave our own roads, we generate our own electricity, lend money at high interest rates, do you think there will be any justification for us to still want to pay taxes? Because that's in response to like paying taxes, access to credit, getting electricity, and the rest of that. The second question, I think is more of a contribution from Mongezi Makalema, I think this is in Kenya, saying, I agree with you on the national bashing. I think it is important for people not to focus so much on the government. There's a lot of wisdom on ground, but you must admit that the office of the president and the vice have not been so good in disseminating information. It should start from the bottom up, find out the challenges of the people. You have done a great job, but take this to the stakeholders for them to address it. And then the final one says, Dr. Oduwole, thank you so much for a great presentation. Please, I have a quick question. This person is a Huffington Post contributor. We are aware that the global business environment is slowly changing. We have slowly moved from the industrial age to the network/internet age, and we are seeing more startups spring up on the Nigerian blogosphere. How can we, as young entrepreneurs, build an enabling business environment for these startups? So I'll just restrict it to those three.
So we'll let's the erudite professor tackle these 1 million questions before the next round of another million.
Okay. Ready, steady, go. So, Dr. Mandy had talked a bit about business ranking, but flip the question to education ranking. As you know, I'm an academic. I'm on leave of absence from a university. So I know exactly what you're talking about. And before I went to Cambridge or Stanford, my first degree was from University of Lagos. So I always start by telling my students that it's actually, it is challenging. There's no denying. Our educational system has progressively, I mean, you can't compare it to what it was in the 60s, 70s, even 80s, 90s. But what is our response? Education is now global, and I tell my students, you will not have an excuse that you were in Lagos, so you're not competing for the same jobs with people around the world. I think also students have a responsibility to educate themselves. Now, I'm not absolving the government and the systemic issues, but what I just tell my students is that you have the internet, which I didn't have while I was going to school. You have a lot of chat rooms and different fora, how you can get education, because I always say knowledge is power, and when you feel empowered by what you know and what you've read, no one can take it away from you. It's not enough to say, the government didn't do this, so I'm not educated. So that's just one thing. But as for the Ministry of Education working on that, we have a lot of children out of school in Nigeria. The problems are there, and there are many. And the funding is another issue. But beyond funding, just even proper organization and implementation. But I will not comment too far because I don't work in that space. I work in industry, trade, and investment. So I wouldn't want to cast aspersions without knowing the full facts. I'm always wary to do that. But I do know that work is ongoing. On the MITI budget, what has changed? I think you heard a lot of what I talked about, what the money is going to be used for. I mentioned the special economic zones. I mentioned the Enabling Business Environment project. And we all know when the money flintered off, money that was meant for the military to fight Boko Haram never made it there. And I think the victory of the election that brought this government into power was actually a victory of the people, because the people used their vote and spoke, especially Nigerian youth. I think it was a victory for democracy, and it was a victory for Nigerian youth. And Nigerian youth are also very vocal right now about the change that they expect, and not very patient, and the change that they want to see. It's now the job of the government to deliver as quickly as possible on those promises. If not, in another couple of years, they use their voice again. And I think that is what matures a society. Shedrack talked about solutions to power. That work is ongoing. I actually thought I printed some of it because I printed some examples, but not. Renewable energy, solar, there are at least 3 projects. I was talking with Minister Fashola just the other day, and he was listening to me. There are at least 3 projects in the northern part of Nigeria on using solar power. So I can actually get you that information so that you know.
To support that, there's a young Nigerian, MIT graduate. He went back to Nigeria. He started solarcover.com.
See.
The guy is making money. You put solar panel on the roof,
Yeah.
not NEPA, you light up your house.
Yeah.
And you don't have to pay for it. You pay gradually.
Yeah.
Solar cover.
Yeah. So there's
almost 2-3 years.
Yeah, there's on-grid solutions and there are off-grid solutions. So there are space, especially for entrepreneurs, there's a lot of room. It's not easy, but then the returns are actually huge because of the market. Let me see. The FX contributions, Shadrach, I think, asked a question. I said before that there was likely to be a diaspora bond soon, and I hope that you will subscribe to the diaspora bond. Demola talked about SMEs. I think a lot of young people have businesses. Almost all my students had one business on the side or another. Anything I say I want, oh yeah, I do t-shirts. Oh yeah, I know that, you know. I think the entrepreneurial spirit of Nigeria, and especially the Nigerian youth, is just amazing. The energy, the entrepreneurial spirit, and we just need to keep at it. It may not be easy, but I think with perseverance, a lot of Nigerian youth are going into such innovative spaces, like what you were just talking about, and their success stories celebrated in Nigeria and around the continent and around the world. So I want to encourage you to please put on your thinking cap, get your ideas, pull funds together with your friends, and start something. Because I think a lot of Nigerian youth have realized that, you know, where are the jobs coming from? Emeka was saying, Niger Delta, give jobs, give jobs, give jobs. The government's job is to create an enabling environment for the private sector to flourish. It's a collaborative effort. And I think I spent a lot of time emphasizing this in the paper because it's really the only way. And if you look at leading economies, you'll see that that's really the model to a large extent that works. And I think politicizing of natural resources, it's a global problem. It's a global problem, but I think with legal frameworks, once legal frameworks are adhered to, you have a better situation. That also links with the CSR in extractive industry. When there are clear frameworks and there's transparency in the extractive industry, then there's less corruption. The fight against corruption, change to the programs. I think we need reorientation, our values. A lot of Nigerians, yes, Nigerian youth looking at negative role models and positive role models. I think there are positive role models to be seen, to be had. The leadership right now, both the president and vice president, pretty much not career politicians, and they don't live that life. So if you want to take the examples of the values and especially in monetary terms of how they live their lives, I think it's fair comment to say that at least half the ministers are technocrats and maybe another half are politicians. So you have a mixed bag, but there are enough positive role models, I think, for a discerning eye. Social media, paying of taxes. There's been a lot of work going on simplifying payment of taxes, on simplifying the forms, taking it online, using Remitter, so there are different categories of taxes. You have the federal and the state, and I believe Mr. George Okoli lives in Lagos State. But even LIRS is doing a lot of work on reforming on taxes, and that's one of the areas that I'm working on personally, so I know for a fact. I want to thank the Kenyan contributor for the comment, and I think it's a fair comment that a lot of Nigerians had said that the communication was not enough. I think some of it has to do with the level of anxiety, 2015, beginning of 2016, as the economy was tapering. I think the levels of anxiety were stronger than the voice of government. So even while government was trying to say, it's going to take a while, it's going to be tough, I think I've heard that speech a million times right from inauguration day or even before resuming office. But somehow there was a disconnect, and we took that feedback and we've been working on it very strongly. There are now so many engagement forums. I think in Nigeria that comment does not come up often anymore. Like I said, there was a presidential quarterly business forum on Monday, on the 23rd, and there have been several others. The ministers go on TV, they speak, they honor invitations, they speak, they write. I think it's fair comment, quite a few of them were in Davos also speaking to the international community 2 weeks ago. I think that particular comment now, we've transcended that bump. Even I have had stakeholder forums in Lagos and in Kano and in Abuja, and I'm planning another round for each quarter this year on doing business in Nigeria, particularly for SMEs. So that's the target audience actually for the work that I do. Huffington Post contributor. So technology has been really quite big in Nigeria. There are a lot of tech entrepreneurs, a lot of hubs going on. And even about, I think it was December or November, they had a night with the vice president and came to the villa. That was when Mark Zuckerberg was in town. a very successful program. There was a competition run by the Office of Vice President, and there were demos submitted, people pitched. The tech entrepreneurs that won got to, I think they got, I can't remember whether it was 5 million naira. They got some grants anyway, the tech entrepreneurs that won. And you know, all of them that had entries that were selected got to come and present at the State House. And we invited businesses. That was just our contribution to boosting the wave. But tech is something like Nollywood, which no one has even mentioned, that doesn't.
Blame just Buhari's government, but I don't think we are solving our problem from the grassroots. To start with, first of all, people always ask me, what do you think Nigeria needs? What is our priority? Is it agriculture? Is it power? Is it security? I know we have a lot of challenges, but looking at the whole stuff going on there, I believe that what government should be looking at is to make sure that Nigeria has power. Now, I had a gentleman talking about solar energy and other stuff. Now, I'm not saying that these things are not great. We have to talk about these things in context. The solar energy we're talking about is still under development. It cannot power large-scale industrialization. People need power to move their business. Now, if you're talking about, if, for instance, everyone has power, you see that that country has a lot of talent because they can tap from it. For instance, somebody having a shop, do not need somebody to come and secure the shop for him or her. Because you have power, you can mount security cameras all over the place. You can see that when you go on the social media now, you can always see video. Policemen are being caught taking bribes. We don't used to have that. We didn't have that in the past. So policemen can do whatever they like and get away with it. But today, I'm not sure you can easily go in public and start taking bribes without somebody getting you on a video. So I'm thinking that this Nigerian government has to do something about power if the country has to move. If there is power, then you see a lot of people going into agriculture. People are saying everybody's farming. That's not what we need. That country is like 100 and something million people there. We don't need people going to farm with hope. If that's what they're doing here, hunger will kill everybody. We need real mechanization, agricultural mechanization, the type that Obasanjo is doing. Now, if you look in Nigeria, the people doing that are the rich people only. People like Obasanjo, they can do that because they have the money to buy all the generator set and everything, and the machine to preserve their products. A poor man cannot do that. You cannot go into field and farm and then be able to preserve your products or export it. The best you can do is to feed your family. That's not enough. So we need power in that country. If you put power on the ground, the country will move. Now, people talk about when Fasharan was appointed the Minister of Power and whatever, people were excited because of his performance during his tenure as Lagos State Governor. But right now, we're all disappointed. In fact, I don't know what he's doing. I don't know what Fasharan is doing. So we expect somebody who knows what it needs to make the country move. Get power into that country, get power, and instead of going around and trying to get people to come from different countries, investors come and invest. No, if you go to the market to buy something and somebody doesn't have his shop open, you're not going to wait there and wait for the person. You look for someone who has his shop open. So I expect that for Nigeria to move, we need to get the power right. Without that, every other thing cannot fall into place. Thank you.
Thank you. Raina, do you want to say one more thing before? Where's the mic?
Sorry, I just had one question, really. The other question I think has been answered regarding the the diaspora funds, you call them. I was wondering what specific initiative the government had for targeting Nigerians that are in diaspora, and if they perhaps wanted to invest in Nigeria. And I think you've responded to that with the diaspora bonds initiative. The second question that I had was regarding this enabling, what exactly it means to have an enabling business environment. And I asked the question in the specific context of security. So last year, so my father has been a farmer since 1983, and he bought a new farm along Kaduna Abuja Expressway, and so he went into rice farming, and it was very lucrative, even before the oil prices crashed and rice became an even bigger thing. And one of the challenges that he had, very significant challenge actually, was he was kidnapped on the farm. And there had to be a ransom, and getting back there is almost impossible now because security is such an issue. And so, and that's just one example of security challenges that threaten business. Because if there isn't security, then what exactly is this enabling environment? And so that's my question.
Thank you. I'll now give Mr. Oli the acting High Commissioner wants to say a few words.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm really thrilled and excited about the quality or discourse of today's discussions. Actually, the issues raised here are germane to our developmental aspirations. Let me first of all thank the Professor Sassin and the organizers of this event, Dr. Okafor, and then the guest speaker. All issues raised are germane, and as the principal representative of Nigeria here, I am limited by some regulations to discuss issues openly here. However, I would limit myself to only a mention being made by somebody here, I cannot recall, on the Prospective and Developers Association of Canada. The annual ritual, just like the annual ritual of private sector and government representatives to discuss businesses and so on. It's just like the mining endeavor in Cape Town, similar to it. It's an annual event in March here. I think somebody raised it here. Yeah, let me say here, I was part of the discussions here last March, and it went on very well. Nigerian representatives were here. The Minister for Mines was here, that is Dr. Fayemi, and other private sector and interest people with interest in the mining sector. They had useful discussions with the private sector and other interested parties in Canada here, and a lot of several MOUs were signed, and the discussions are on. The members of delegation from here have gone to Nigeria, and it's something that the results are not sudden. You will not see them on the surface until the issues have been clearly well thrashed out. I need to emphasize here that the mining sector is really going on very, very well, especially the partnership between Nigeria and the Canadian concerns. Once more, thank you very much for this thing. But I think a comment from my colleague, Mr. Olide. Thank you.
Thank you. I must join the High Commissioner to appreciate the distinguished Senior Special Assistant to Mr. President. Thank you for your presentation. Just a couple of things to add in respect of facts regarding the presentation. Just to mention that in the area of diasporians, and of course Professor Okafor would remember this, we were together in Calgary a couple of months ago, talking to the annual convention of Nigerians in diaspora. That's the professionals of Nigerians all over the world. They had their convention. And he would remember that for 3 days we were there brainstorming and all of that. And largely, I had the arduous task of having to provide up-to-date facts. In so many respects, he was there and all of that. Indeed, we had a presentation from a particular lawyer, Nigerian lawyer based in the US, who came to make a presentation and was talking about so many things that Nigeria had indeed done 10, 20 years ago, and was presenting a paper and was still saying that Nigeria needed to have this. Nigeria needed to have this. And I remember Dr. Kafo, when I responded and I began to tell the woman, in 1920, we had this. In 2000 and something, this came into place and all of that. Several of those things are in place. Take, for instance, when we're talking of the issue of the forest thing and what government has done, one of the things government did in recent times is the licensing of the international money transfer operators. 11 operators were licensed in that regard. And I know they had done quite so many things to make sure that that space is opened up, and they're working. In addition, you will still recall that even between 2013 and 2015, and on an annual basis according to the World Bank, the remittances we were having, inbound remittances into Nigeria, was in the region of $21 billion annually. This is by the World Bank. So it's not as if there is a total apathy on the part of Nigerians in diaspora in that regard. But take note of the fact that most of these remittances were not being channeled into productive sectors. And that's one thing that government is working on now. That's part of our presentation, to ensure that much more attention, and that's the reason for the ease of doing business and all the other activities that government had indeed come up with. Invariably, if Nigerians in diaspora could on an annual basis successively for about 3-4 years remit $21 billion annually, according to the World Bank, I repeat, so anyone can check it out. It means that from the same Nigerians in the diaspora on an annual basis, and for productive purposes, we can easily well, that is with the appropriate structures, policies in place by government, we can easily well get $50 billion. It means that's possible. If $21 billion could come in for private purposes and all such things, we can have much more. So I guess that government is doing a lot of work in that regard, and that's the essence of the ease of doing business and a lot of things being done here. Just again, as I said, to just flesh up some of the facts, here we also have in place in Nigeria an economic diversification policy. It's already there. Government has already rolled out an economic diversification policy. And I guess that some of us in the diaspora would need to familiarize ourselves with some of these areas, just as she rightly said, such that we can tap into them. There are so many opportunities in this regard, and I believe that we will largely be helpful in respect of getting into these areas. Diversification, there is already a power diversification committee already set up by the Ministry of Power in respect of solar and other non-renewable energy and renewable and non-renewable. There is already a committee in place working today in that regard, set up by the government. So it's not as if this has not been taken care of. Our government has already, our committee is already in place working to ensure that we have that. And I want to specifically mention that for anyone, because I've had comments a few times about the issue of solar panels and all of that. Let me just say that if anyone needs to be guided in that regard, I'll give you my number. Please get in touch with me. I will connect you with Waheed Olagunju, Bank of Industry.
I know that there is a window already opened by the Bank of Industry in that regard for entrepreneurs who would like to go into that area of energy and all of that. And certain individuals had already started working with the Bank of Industry in that area to ensure that it's opened up and a lot more people who have anything to offer would get into that sector. I must thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I'll now let the distinguished speaker respond to whatever she can respond to. We don't have
Wrap
time,
up.
actually,
Okay,
but,
I'll just, just very quickly. Ugo, thank you very much for your question. I think we'll chat more offline on what exactly your interests are. We'll discuss social media. But for participating, I think probably a good way to start would be either an internship or if you haven't done your National Youth Corps, that's a good way to start, working in government. Halima, thank you for recognizing the name search, the registration portal and name search. That was work, we sweated over. So it's heartwarming when it's filtered into the users. We're definitely working on end-to-end. The big problem, as you know, with having registration of companies completely online is the stamp duties element. Yeah, but FIRS on its own has worked on reform. You now pay online on Remitter. So we're trying to interface their systems so that you can just click, go to the FIRS website, pay, click back, upload, and then another thing is the stamping, this company seal, and the signatures, but offloading on forms. But that process, we're reviewing it and we're working very closely with CAC. I've been working with them for over a year now on this process. The FX, you've had some insights. It's a tough one. To be honest, it's a tough one. The central bank has an unenviable position of trying to balance inflation, supply shortage, and even in government, we don't always agree on the direction of monetary policy. There's fiscal policy, but the one thing I can assure you is that people are working on it to see it solved. I mean, that's really the only thing that people want to see. That's the public, but that's the only thing night and day the ministers, the CBN governor are working on. Chidi, I think a good part of my presentation spoke about power, and power being the #1 priority. For industrialization, you need infrastructure, you need power. Sorry? No wonder. I think everybody got that. Yeah. So I could share with you a good part of it. And I did not even go into detail of a lot more information on power, the projects coming on, where they are right now in terms of completion, what's coming on, what's getting onto the grid. I had a very good conversation with the minister just before my boss went to Davos. I needed to get an update. And the sharing of communication, although the Minister of Power is particularly good with communicating his plans, they've had challenges with gas supply, with the Niger Delta Avengers, no doubt. But even with that, they've been able to start coming up again. They were doing quite well this time last year. And then it started going down when the bombing started. But they've started coming back up again. So, and then we have a lot of IPPs and off-grid solutions, which we've talked about as well. Now for agriculture, also again, the agri sector is a very interesting one. The farmers for once are encouraged. And there are different stratas of farming. You have the mechanized farming, and it's not for everybody. You have the rural farmers. What's important is to group them into cooperatives and get off-takers that will buy from them in bulk. Because you're right, they are producers, they're not processors. So we're focusing a lot on agribusiness. I can talk about rice. Nabila was talking about rice farming. I can talk about rice. I can talk about work we've done on tomatoes, which is highly perishable. Rice, you can even store the paddy for quite a while. But tomatoes is a 48-hour window. So you need the processors, you have the Dangotes, you have the Eriscos, you have a lot of stuff going on. The competition of the imports coming in from China, Italy, and the US on AAA concentrate, the tomato puree. So that's a substitute to the farmers, and there's been a lot of issues of what to do on the policy. And also you have some people, because they don't have Forex, they're on the 41 items if you've been following, but they produce in Ghana and bring it into the land borders. So there are different moving parts. It's always very interesting because, of course, there's more information on this side, and I wish I could just, break it down if you're that interested in particular sectors. I can speak about tomatoes, rice, some other sectors, and what we've been doing specifically in those areas. I think the last question is from Nabila. Yes, there's the diaspora bond that will be coming up this year. There's the housing fund. There are quite a few initiatives that you can plug into. I think the best thing is to get a good financial advisor at home. We have quite an advanced financial services sector, and a number of HNIs invest abroad, and a number of HNIs in diaspora invest at home. But I think the knowledge asymmetry is really what causes the problem. When you have confidence in the knowledge, there are of course areas that one shouldn't go into right now that are volatile, that are not stable, but there's some areas that are almost like a mint right now. So it's just about knowing where to go and also timing. So the security thing is big. I talked about it in relation to solid minerals. The permanent secretary was telling me the prospectors that come into the country and go into the bush looking for the minerals, they always have to incur additional costs. And we've had a lot of stuff with farming, we've had with the cattle. There's been a lot going on, but there are plans and there are strategies being implemented. I think we're going to end now. Are we ending now? Okay. So if we're going to...
Just a last comment.
Okay, because I wanted to...
I skipped him
okay.
without
Okay.
Dr. Pius Simon.
Okay, please.
A last comment. It's not a question, so you can...
Yeah. No, I want to make my last... I want to make my last one when they're done.
Okay.
Yeah. So, thank you all for coming. Thank you for the vibrant discussion. I did not expect any less, and I haven't been disappointed. I have really enjoyed it. I think it gives me hope that wherever Nigerians are, when there's talk on the country, people come up and they're engaged. What I would leave you with is a challenge on solutions. I think Yemi has pretty much started the conversation on those things that bother you the most. Take the time to find out the current status. I think the information asymmetry is real, because when I hear comments, I know that truly if people knew, they would not ask. But I think if people ask, then they would know. So is it the chicken or the egg? But on a serious note, communication-wise, the government has taken it very, indeed, that's part of why I'm here today. Just an opportunity to come all the way to Canada to speak with Africans and Nigerians and really talk about where the continent is right now, different countries, particularly Nigeria. So I would urge you to keep engaged. I would urge you to keep hope alive. There's a lot of misconceptions out there, and there's a lot of emoting. We're very passionate people, but there are others that are dispassionately considering the very same economy, and they are finding it interesting, very interesting. The number of people that want to see the president, the vice president, the ministers coming with their funds, and they want serious concessions everywhere, Singapore, China, everywhere. Even though the figures in the short term may look funny, the fundamentals are still very strong, and I think a lot of astute, sophisticated investors know that. So I'd like to thank you for coming. And if you have any direct questions, if you want me to link you up with people in power or different aspects of the economy, just take the time to really focus on those areas of the economy that are, pertinent, germane to you, and you will be pleasantly surprised. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you.